Sometimes the most extraordinary stories hide behind the most ordinary appearances. In a world where we judge books by their covers and people by their clothes, we often miss the heroes walking among us. This is the story of Maria Santos, a young woman whose worn military uniform became the target of cruel mockery until one observant eye recognized what others had failed to see. What happened next would not only change Maria's life forever, but would also teach an entire community a lesson about respect, sacrifice, and the true meaning of honor. This is a story about looking beyond the surface and discovering that sometimes the most tattered exterior can house the strongest heart. Maria Santos pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders as she walked through the bustling downtown area. The fabric was faded from too many washes, and small tears had been carefully mended with whatever thread she could find. Her military boots, though polished to the best of her ability, showed clear signs of wear, with scuffed leather and worn soles that had walked countless miles. She had been living in the city for 3 months now, trying to rebuild her life after her deployment ended. The transition from military service to civilian life had been harder than she ever imagined. Finding steady work proved difficult, and the little savings she had were quickly running out. The small apartment she rented was in a rough neighborhood, but it was all she could afford on her limited income from odd jobs. Maria worked at a local diner during breakfast and lunch shifts, earning minimum wage plus tips that barely covered her basic expenses. The diner was located in the financial district, where well-dressed business people grabbed quick meals between meetings. Her manager, Mrs. Zero Chen, was kind enough to let her work despite her unconventional appearance, but Maria could sense the hesitation from customers who weren't used to seeing someone in military fatigue serving their coffee. Every morning, Maria would iron her uniform as best she could with the small travel iron she owned. She took pride in maintaining a neat appearance, even though the clothes themselves were clearly showing their age. The jacket bore the patches and insignia from her unit, details that held deep meaning for her, but appeared as mere decorations to most civilians who saw them. On this particular Tuesday morning, Maria was walking to work when she passed a group of young professionals waiting at a bus stop. They were dressed in expensive suits and carried leather briefcases, their appearance polished and perfect. As Maria walked by, she couldn't help but overhear their conversation. "Look at that," whispered Sarah, a marketing executive in her late 20s. She nudged her colleague, pointing discreetly at Maria. "Is she seriously wearing that old military costume to work? It looks like she got it from a thrift store." Her friend Jennifer, a lawyer at a prestigious firm, smirked and shook her head. "It's probably surplus gear. I bet she never even served. Some people just wear the uniform for attention or to get sympathy tips." A third member of their group, David, a financial analyst, joined in the mockery. "Those boots look like they've been through a war zone. Maybe she should invest in some proper work clothes instead of playing dress-up." The group continued their cruel commentary as Maria passed, their voices carrying just loud enough for her to hear every word. She felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and hurt, but she kept walking, maintaining the same steady pace she had learned during her military training. She had heard similar comments before, but they never stopped stinging. Maria understood why people might judge her appearance. In a city filled with fashion-conscious professionals, her faded uniform stood out like a sore thumb. But what these strangers didn't know was the story behind those clothes and the sacrifices they represented. As she continued her walk to work, more people seemed to notice her. Some stared openly, others whispered to their companions, and a few even pointed. Maria felt increasingly self-conscious, but she reminded herself of the pride she once felt wearing this uniform, and the brothers and sisters in arms who had worn similar ones. When she finally reached the diner, Maria was relieved to step inside, where Mrs. Chen greeted her with a warm smile. The elderly restaurant owner had never asked many questions about Maria's background, but she seemed to sense that there was more to her story than met the eye.
"Good morning, Maria, Mrs. Perry,"
Chen said kindly. "The breakfast rush is about to start. Are you ready for another busy day?" Maria nodded and headed to the back to clock in and grab her apron. As she tied it around her waist, covering most of her uniform jacket, she felt a small sense of relief. At least while she was working, people would see her as just another server, not someone to be mocked for her appearance. The morning rush began as expected, with business people hurrying in for their caffeine fix and quick breakfast before heading to their offices. Maria moved efficiently between tables, taking orders and serving food with the same attention to details she had learned in the military. She treated every customer with respect and professionalism, even those who seemed to look down on her. Around mid-morning, a group of college students came in, laughing and joking loudly. They were clearly from wealthy families, dressed in designer clothes and carrying expensive gadgets. As Maria approached their table to take their order, She overheard one of them making a comment about her appearance. "Oh my God! Look at our waitress!" giggled Ashley, a sorority member from the local university. "Is she seriously wearing army clothes to work? That's so weird." Her friend Madison rolled her eyes. "It's probably some kind of statement. You know how some people try to act all tough and military when they've probably never even left this state." The third girl, Brittany, took out her phone and discreetly tried to take a picture. "This is so going on my Instagram story. My followers will die when they see this." Maria felt her hands shake slightly as she approached the table, but she maintained her composure. "Good morning, ladies. Welcome to Chen's Diner. Can I start you off with some coffee or juice?" The girls exchanged glances and barely suppressed giggles. They ordered their food with an air of superiority, speaking to Maria as if she were beneath them. Throughout their meal, they continued to make quiet comments and jokes, clearly enjoying their perceived superiority over someone they saw as different. After they left, Maria found herself in the restroom, looking at her reflection in the mirror. The face staring back at her was tired and worn down, but there was still strength in her eyes. She touched the small unit patch on her jacket, remembering the day she had earned the right to wear it. The patch bore the insignia of the 82nd Airborne Division, one of the most elite units in the U.S. Army. It represented years of rigorous training, multiple deployments, and countless sacrifices. But to the people who mocked her, it was just another piece of fabric on an old uniform. Maria had served 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan, where she had worked as a combat medic. She had saved lives under fire, comforted dying soldiers, and faced dangers that most people could never imagine. The uniform she wore had been with her through some of the most challenging moments of her life. And despite its worn appearance, it represented honor, courage, and sacrifice. But explaining all of this to strangers seemed impossible. How could she make them understand that the faded fabric and worn patches told the story of a hero, not someone to be mocked? How could she convey the weight of responsibility she had carried and the lives she had touched during her service? As the lunch rush approached, Maria tried to push the negative thoughts out of her mind. She had work to do, and dwelling on the comments of ignorant people wouldn't change anything. She had faced much worse challenges than a few cruel remarks from strangers. However, the mockery was beginning to take its toll. Each snide comment and judgmental look chipped away at her confidence. Maria had left the military with pride in her service, but months of civilian judgment were making her question whether wearing her uniform was worth the constant embarrassment. She considered buying civilian work clothes, but the practical reality was that she simply couldn't afford them. Her military uniforms were still in good condition despite their worn appearance, and purchasing an entirely new wardrobe would require money she didn't have. She was caught in a difficult situation, needing to work to survive, but being judged for her appearance while doing so. During her break, Maria sat in the small employee area behind the kitchen and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through social media, seeing posts from her former military colleagues who had successfully transitioned to civilian careers. Many of them had found good jobs and seemed to be thriving in their new lives. Maria wondered if she had made a mistake in her choice of city or if she simply wasn't trying hard enough to fit in. The afternoon brought more of the same treatment. A businessman waiting for his takeout order made a loud comment to his friend about people who wear military surplus to get attention. A group of teenagers pointed and laughed as they passed by the diner window. Even some of the regular customers, who had previously been polite, seemed to view her differently after hearing the comments from others. Mrs. Chen noticed Maria's declining mood as the day progressed. During a quiet moment between customers, she approached her with concern in her eyes. "Maria, is everything okay today? You seem troubled." Maria appreciated her boss's kindness, but she didn't want to burden her with personal problems. "I'm fine, Mrs. Bell." "Chen. Just a little tired, that's all." The older woman studied her carefully. "You know, Maria, I've been running this diner for over 20 years. I've seen many people come and go, and I can usually tell when someone is carrying a heavy burden. If you ever want to talk, I'm a good listener." Maria felt a lump form in her throat at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you, Mrs. Wedd." "Chen, I really appreciate that." As the day wore on, Maria found herself dreading the walk home. She knew she would have to face the same judgmental stares and possible comments from strangers on the street. The thought of enduring more mockery made her feel exhausted before she even left the diner. When her shift finally ended, Maria said goodbye to Mrs. Suskin. Shannon stepped out into the late afternoon sunlight. The streets were busy with people leaving work and heading home for the day. As she began her walk, she tried to keep her head up and maintain the confident posture she had learned in the military. But the day's events had worn her down more than she cared to admit. For the first time since leaving the military, Maria began to question whether she belonged in this city, or if she should consider moving somewhere else where people might be more understanding of her situation. As she walked home through the crowded streets, Maria had no idea that her life was about to change dramatically. Tomorrow would bring an encounter that would not only vindicate her dignity, but also reveal the true value of the uniform she wore with such quiet pride. Wednesday morning arrived with a grey sky that seemed to match Maria's mood. She had spent the previous evening lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and questioning her choices. The mockery from strangers was becoming harder to ignore, and she was beginning to wonder if she should swallow her pride and ask her family for money to buy civilian clothes. Maria's family lived in a small town, 3 states away. Her parents were hard-working people who had always supported her military career, but they were struggling financially themselves. Her father worked at a factory that had been cutting hours, and her mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. The last thing Maria wanted was to burden them with her problems. As she prepared for work, Maria stood in front of her small closet, looking at her limited options. She owned 3 sets of military uniforms, all in similar condition, and a few casual clothes that weren't appropriate for work. The choice was simple, but it felt increasingly difficult to make. She chose her cleanest uniform set and spent extra time ironing it, hoping that a crisper appearance might somehow make her less of a target for criticism. As she prepared to leave her apartment, Maria caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. Despite the worn fabric, she still carried herself with the bearing and confidence that years of military training had instilled in her. The walk to work began like any other day. Maria kept her eyes forward and her pace steady, trying to ignore the familiar looks from passers-by. But as she approached the business district, she noticed something different in the air. There seemed to be more activity than usual, with several official-looking vehicles parked along the main street. As she got closer to the diner, Maria saw that a small crowd had gathered near the City Hall building, which was located just 2 blocks from where she worked. There were news vans parked nearby, and she could see reporters setting up equipment. It appeared that some kind of official event was taking place. Maria's curiosity was piqued, but she didn't have time to investigate. She needed to get to work on time, and Mrs. Chen was counting on her for the morning rush. As she approached the diner, she saw her boss standing outside, also looking toward the commotion near City Hall. "Good morning, Mrs. Chen. What's all the excitement about?" The older woman shrugged. "I'm not sure, but I heard from Mr. Rodriguez next door that some important military officials are visiting the city today. Something about a ceremony or meeting at City Hall." Maria felt a small spark of interest at the mention of military officials, but she pushed it aside. Whatever was happening, it had nothing to do with her. She was just trying to get through another day of work without incident. The morning rush at the diner was busier than usual, partly due to the increased foot traffic from the event at City Hall. Maria found herself serving reporters, city officials, and curious onlookers who had come to see what was happening. Most of the customers were polite and focused on the excitement outside, which provided a welcome relief from the usual judgmental comments about her appearance. Around mid-morning, a middle-aged man in a suit entered the diner and took a seat at one of Maria's tables. He appeared to be some kind of government official, based on his formal attire and the official-looking badge he wore on his jacket. As Maria approached to take his order, he looked up from his phone with a smile. "Good morning. I'll have coffee, black, and whatever your breakfast special is today." "Coming right up, sir," Maria replied professionally. As she turned to leave, she noticed him glancing at her uniform with what appeared to be interest rather than judgment. When she returned with his coffee, he was still looking thoughtful. "Excuse me, miss," he said quietly. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but is that an 82nd Airborne patch you're wearing?" Maria was surprised by the question. Most civilians didn't recognize specific unit patches, and she wasn't used to anyone showing genuine interest in her military background. "Yes, sir. I served with the 82nd for 4 years." The man's expression changed to one of respect and interest. "That's an impressive unit. Thank you for your service. I'm actually here with a group of officials from the Department of Veterans Affairs. We're in town for a ceremony honoring local veterans." Maria felt a mix of emotions at his words. It had been months since anyone had thanked her for her service, and the simple acknowledgement meant more than she could express. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." As she continued serving other customers, Maria found herself thinking about the man's words. It was refreshing to meet someone who recognized the significance of her uniform rather than seeing it as something to mock. The lunch rush brought its usual challenges, but Maria noticed that the presence of official visitors seemed to create a more respectful atmosphere in the diner. People were on their best behavior, perhaps aware that important guests might be observing them. During a brief lull in service, Mrs. Decorowit Chen approached Maria with a thoughtful expression. Maria, I've been thinking about what that gentleman said earlier about the veterans ceremony. Have you ever considered reaching out to veterans organizations in the city? They might be able to help you with job placement or other resources. Maria had actually looked into veteran services when she first arrived in the city, but she had been discouraged by long waiting lists and complicated application processes. The organizations were understaffed and overwhelmed with requests for help from veterans who were struggling with various challenges. I've tried a few places, Mrs. Chen, but most of them have waiting lists that are months long. I need work now, not 6 months from now. Chen nodded understandingly. Well, if you ever want to try again, I'd be happy to give you time off for appointments. You've been a reliable employee, and I can see that you're dealing with more challenges than just finding work. The kindness in her boss's voice nearly brought tears to Maria's eyes.
It was moments like these that reminded her that not everyone in the world was cruel or judgmental.
As the afternoon progressed, Maria noticed that the activity near City Hall was increasing.
More official vehicles had arrived, and she could see people in military dress uniforms walking between the buildings. The sight of proper military uniforms made her acutely aware of her own worn fatigues, but it also stirred feelings of pride and nostalgia for her time in service. Around 3 o'clock, a young woman about Maria's age entered the diner. She was dressed in expensive clothing and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never faced real hardship. As she took a seat in Maria's section, she immediately pulled out her phone and began taking selfies. When Maria approached to take her order, the young woman looked her up and down with obvious disdain. "Oh my God, are you seriously wearing that to work?" she said loudly, making sure other customers could hear. "That outfit looks like it came from a Halloween costume shop." Maria felt the familiar sting of embarrassment, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "What can I get for you today, miss?" "I'll have a skinny latte and a salad, but make sure the lettuce is organic. I don't want any of that cheap stuff." The woman continued to stare at Maria's uniform with disgust. "Honestly, I can't believe restaurants let their staff dress like that. It's so unprofessional." As Maria wrote down the order, she noticed that several other customers were now looking in their direction. Some seemed uncomfortable with the woman's rude behavior, while others appeared to be enjoying the spectacle. "I'll get that order started for you right away," Maria said calmly, turning to leave.
"Wait," the
What?
woman called out.
"I want to speak to your manager. I think customers should know that this place hires people who can't even dress appropriately for work." Maria's heart sank. She really couldn't afford to lose this job, and she worried that Mrs. Dr. Paul Chen might give in to customer pressure rather than risk bad reviews or complaints. Mrs. Chen appeared from behind the counter, having overheard the commotion. She approached the table with a polite but firm expression. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes, there is," the woman said haughtily. "Your waitress is dressed completely inappropriately. I mean, look at her. She looks like she's playing soldier or something. It's really off-putting for customers." Mrs. Chen looked at Maria, then back at the complaining customer. "Ma'am, my employees are required to dress neatly and professionally, which Maria does every day. Her clothing is clean and appropriate for work." "But it's military stuff. It's weird and makes me uncomfortable. You should have a proper dress code that requires normal clothes." Other customers in the diner had stopped eating to watch the confrontation. Maria felt mortified to be the center of such attention, but she was grateful that Mrs. Chen was standing up for her. "Ma'am, there is nothing inappropriate about Maria's attire. She is a veteran who has served our country, and she has every right to wear her uniform. If you're uncomfortable with that, perhaps you'd prefer to dine elsewhere." The woman's face turned red with indignation. "This is ridiculous. I'm never coming back here. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows about your unprofessional staff." She gathered her belongings and stormed out of the diner, leaving behind a stunned silence. Gradually, the other customers returned to their meals and conversations, though Maria could feel their eyes on her as she continued working. One elderly gentleman at a nearby table called Maria over and spoke quietly to her. "Miss, I want you to know that woman was completely out of line. I served in Korea, and I have nothing but respect for anyone who's worn the uniform. Don't let ignorant people like that get you down." His words provided some comfort, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling that incidents like this were becoming too frequent. She was starting to wonder how much longer she could endure the constant judgment and criticism. As her shift neared its end, Maria found herself looking forward to going home and hiding away from the world for the evening. But as she prepared to leave, Mrs. Chen called her aside. "Maria, I want you to know that I meant every word I said to that customer today. You're a good employee and a good person, and anyone who can't see that is missing out. Don't let the opinions of small-minded people change how you see yourself. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes at the unexpected support. Thank you, Mrs. Crowd. Chen, I really don't know what I'd do without this job. You don't need to worry about that. As long as you want to work here, you have a place. As Maria walked home through the still busy streets, she reflected on the day's events. The kindness of the VA official and Mrs. Overseer Chen's support had provided bright spots in an otherwise challenging day, but the cruel comments from the young woman still stung. As she passed by City Hall, Maria noticed that the official ceremony was apparently taking place inside, as the street was quieter than it had been earlier. She wondered what kind of recognition was being given to local veterans and whether any of them had faced similar challenges in transitioning to civilian life. That evening, as Maria sat in her small apartment eating a simple dinner, she made a decision. She would continue wearing her uniform with pride, regardless of what others thought. It represented the best years of her life and the most important work she had ever done. If people wanted to judge her for it, that said more about them than it did about her. Little did she know that tomorrow would bring an encounter that would change everything and prove that sometimes the right person notices what others miss. Thursday morning brought an unexpected change in weather. The grey clouds that had dominated the sky for days finally gave way to bright sunshine, creating a more hopeful atmosphere throughout the city. Maria took this as a positive sign as she prepared for another day of work, though she had no idea just how significant this day would become. As she made her way through the downtown area, Maria noticed that there was still residual activity from the previous day's events at City Hall. Several official vehicles remained parked nearby, and she could see people in military dress uniforms moving between buildings. The sight filled her with a bittersweet mixture of pride and longing for her days in active service. The morning rush at the diner proceeded normally, with the usual mix of business people grabbing quick breakfasts before heading to their offices. Maria served each customer with her characteristic professionalism, despite the occasional judgmental glance at her worn uniform. Around 10:30, as the breakfast crowd was beginning to thin out, an older gentleman entered the diner. He was tall and distinguished-looking, with silver hair and a commanding presence that seemed to fill the room. He wore a well-tailored dark suit and carried himself with the kind of confidence that comes from years of leadership experience. Maria was clearing a table when he entered, and she noticed that several other customers glanced in his direction with obvious curiosity. There was something about the man that commanded attention, though she couldn't quite place what it was. He chose a table near the window and sat down, immediately pulling out his phone to check messages. As Maria approached with a menu and water glass, she observed that he had the bearing and posture of someone with military experience, though she couldn't be certain. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Chen's Diner. Can I start you with some coffee?" The man looked up from his phone and smiled warmly. "Good morning." "Yes, coffee would be perfect." "Black, please." As Maria turned to get his coffee, she felt his eyes following her movement. When she returned with the steaming cup, he was studying her uniform with an intensity that made her slightly uncomfortable. "Thank you," he said, accepting the coffee. "I'll need a few minutes to look at the menu, if that's all right." "Of course, sir." "Take your time." Maria moved on to serve other customers, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the distinguished gentleman was continuing to observe her. Unlike the usual stares she received, his attention didn't feel judgmental or mocking. Instead, it seemed analytical, as if he was trying to figure something out. About 10 minutes later, he signaled for her to return to his table. As she approached, Maria noticed that he had set down his menu and was looking at her with a more focused expression. "I'll have the eggs Benedict and wheat toast, please." "But before you go, I have a question. That unit patch you're wearing, could you tell me about it?" Maria was surprised by the directness of his question, but something about his manner suggested genuine interest rather than casual curiosity. "It's from the 82nd Airborne Division, sir. I served with them for 4 years." The man's eyebrows raised slightly, and his expression became even more attentive. "The 82nd Airborne, that's an elite unit. What was your role there?" "I was a combat medic, sir. I did 3 deployments to Afghanistan." For a moment, the man was silent, studying her face carefully. Then he leaned forward slightly and spoke in a lower voice. 3 deployments as a combat medic. That's serious service. Tell me, what unit specifically were you with?" Maria hesitated for a moment, wondering why this stranger was asking such detailed questions about her military service. But something about his authoritative manner made her feel compelled to answer. "I was with the 2nd Brigade Combat Team, sir." specifically the 307th Brigade Support Battalion. The man's expression changed dramatically. His eyes widened with what appeared to be recognition, and he leaned back in his chair as if processing important information. The 307th BSB. Were you deployed to Kandahar province in 2018? Maria felt a chill run down her spine. Very few people would know such specific details about unit deployments unless they had direct involvement with military operations. Yes, sir. I was there from March to December 2018. The man was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. What's your name, soldier? The formal way he addressed her made Maria instinctively straighten her posture. Maria Santos, sir. Specialist Maria Santos. You saved the life of Lieutenant Colonel James Mitchell on September 15, 2018, during a convoy attack near Forward Operating Base Wilson. Maria's world seemed to stop. She stared at the man in complete shock, her mind racing to process what he had just said. Very few people knew the details of that specific incident, and she had never spoken about it publicly. Sir, how do you know about that? The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather wallet. From it, he extracted a military identification card and placed it on the table where Maria could see it. Because Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell is my son, and I'm Brigadier General Robert Mitchell. Maria felt her legs go weak. She gripped the back of a nearby chair to steady herself as the full impact of this revelation hit her. The distinguished gentleman she had been serving was not just any customer. He was a high-ranking military officer, and more importantly, he was the father of a man whose life she had saved. Sir, I had no idea. Please, sit down for a moment, the general said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I think we need to talk. Maria glanced around the diner, aware that other customers were watching the interaction with curiosity. Mrs. Chen was behind the counter, but she seemed to sense that something important was happening, and didn't interrupt. I can't leave my table, sir. I'm working. This will just take a minute, please. Maria reluctantly sat down, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to process the situation. The general leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. Specialist Santos, my son told me about what happened that day. He said a combat medic named Maria Santos saved his life when their convoy was hit by an IED. He was critically injured, and without immediate medical attention, he would have died. Maria remembered that day vividly. The explosion had been massive, flipping 2 vehicles and causing multiple casualties. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell had been trapped in an overturned Humvee with severe internal injuries and was losing blood rapidly. Maria had crawled under enemy fire to reach him and had worked for over an hour to stabilize his condition until they could be evacuated. I was just doing my job, sir. No, the general said firmly. What you did that day went far beyond duty. James told me that you stayed with him under fire, refusing to leave even when other soldiers ordered you to take cover. You saved his life, and in doing so, you gave our family a miracle. Maria felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. She had never expected to meet anyone connected to that day, let alone the father of the man she had treated.
How is Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell doing, sir? He's doing very well.
He made a full recovery thanks to you. He's currently stationed in Germany and has a beautiful family, a wife and 2 young children who exist because you refused to give up on their father. The weight of these words hit Maria harder than any mockery or judgment she had endured over the past few months. To know that her actions had not only saved a life, but had protected an entire family's future was overwhelming. Sir, I'm honored to know that he recovered fully. That means everything to me. The general studied her for a moment longer, then looked around the diner at her worn uniform and modest surroundings. Specialist Santos, what are you doing working as a waitress? Someone with your training and experience should be in a position that recognizes your value. Maria felt embarrassed to explain her situation to such a high-ranking officer, but his genuine concern made her feel safe to be honest. Sir, the transition to civilian life has been more difficult than I expected. I've been looking for work that matches my medical training, but most hospitals want civilian credentials or specialized certifications that I don't have. This job pays the bills while I figure out my next steps. The general frowned, clearly displeased with what he was hearing. That's unacceptable. You're a highly trained combat medic with real-world experience that most civilian medical professionals will never have. There should be programs to help veterans like you transition into appropriate careers. There are some programs, sir, but they have long waiting lists, and I needed work immediately when I arrived here. Where are you living now? I have a small apartment about 15 blocks from here, sir. The general was quiet for a moment, apparently thinking through something important. When he looked at Maria again, his expression had changed to one of determination. Specialist Santos, I'm in town for another 2 days as part of a Veterans Affairs Review Committee. We're examining how well this city supports its veteran population. Your situation is exactly the kind of thing we need to address. Maria wasn't sure what he meant, but she could see that he was formulating some kind of plan. Sir, I don't want to be any trouble. I'm managing okay on my own. You're not trouble, soldier. You're a hero who deserves better than what you're getting, and I intend to make sure you get it. At that moment, Mrs. Chen approached the table with a concerned expression. She had been watching the conversation from a distance and could see that it was emotionally charged. Excuse me, is everything all right here? The general stood up and extended his hand to Mrs. Chen with a warm smile. Ma'am, I'm Brigadier General Robert Mitchell. I was just having a very important conversation with one of your employees. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened with surprise as she shook his hand. General? Oh my, I had no idea we had such an important visitor. Ma'am, you have a very special employee in Maria Santos. She's a war hero who saved my son's life, and she deserves to be treated with the highest respect. Mrs. Chen looked at Maria with amazement and pride. Maria, you never told me you were a hero. Maria felt overwhelmed by the attention and praise. I'm not a hero, Mrs. BCA. Chen, I just did what I was trained to do. That's exactly what a hero would say, the general said firmly. Mrs. Wallity. Chen, I hope you realize what an honor it is to have someone like Specialist Santos working for you. I've always known Maria was special. Mrs. Chen replied. She's the best employee I've ever had. Always professional, always kind to customers, even when they don't deserve it. The general's expression grew more serious. What do you mean, when they don't deserve it, Mrs. Pia? Chen glanced at Maria, who looked uncomfortable. Well, some people have been rude to Maria because of her uniform. They don't understand what it represents. The general's face darkened with anger. Someone has been disrespecting a veteran? That's completely unacceptable. Maria quickly intervened. Sir, it's not a big deal. Some people just don't understand. But it's okay. No, Specialist Santos, it's not okay. It's never okay to disrespect someone who has served their country with honor. The general sat back down and pulled out his phone. I'm going to make some calls. There are people who need to know about you, and there are programs that should be helping veterans like you succeed. As he began making phone calls, Maria excused herself to check on her other customers. Her mind was reeling from this unexpected encounter, and she could barely focus on her work. The idea that the father of a man whose life she had saved was sitting in her section seemed too incredible to be real. Over the next hour, General Mitchell made several phone calls while finishing his breakfast. Maria could overhear parts of his conversations, and it was clear that he was speaking to important people about veteran services and support programs. When he was ready to leave, he called Maria back to his table one final time. Specialist Santos, I want you to know that this encounter has been one of the most meaningful experiences I've had in years. To randomly meet the person who saved my son's life feels like divine intervention. Sir, I feel the same way. I never expected to meet anyone connected to that day. I'm going to be working on some things that should help your situation. Can you give me your contact information? Maria provided her phone number and address, still hardly believing that this was really happening. Sir, I want to thank you for treating me with such kindness. It means more than you know. The general stood up and, to Maria's surprise, saluted her with full military formality. Specialist Santos, it has been an honor to meet you. You are a credit to your uniform and your country. As he left the diner, Maria stood watching through the window as he walked away. Other customers who had witnessed parts of the interaction were looking at her with new respect and curiosity. Mrs. Retired Task. Chen approached her with tears in her eyes. Maria, I can't believe you never told me you were a war hero. I'm really not a hero, Mrs. Peck. Chen, I was just a soldier doing my job. Well, that general certainly thinks you're a hero. And after seeing how he treated you, I think everyone in this restaurant has a new understanding of what that uniform represents. As Maria returned to work, she noticed that the atmosphere in the diner had changed completely. Customers who had previously ignored or judged her were now looking at her with respect and curiosity. The encounter with General Mitchell had transformed not just her day, but potentially her entire future. She had no idea that the general's phone calls were already setting in motion a series of events that would change her life forever. Friday morning arrived with an energy that Maria had never experienced before. Word of yesterday's encounter with General Mitchell had spread quickly through the small community around the diner. Mrs. Chen had told her husband, who had mentioned it to neighboring business owners, and by evening, several people in the area knew that the quiet waitress in military fatigues was actually a decorated combat veteran who had saved lives. Maria arrived at work to find Mrs. Chen waiting for her with an excited expression and a newspaper in her hands. "Maria, you need to see this," she said, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. The newspaper was open to the local section, where a small article bore the headline, "Local Veteran Honored by Visiting General." The piece described how Brigadier General Robert Mitchell had encountered a former combat medic during his visit to the city and had publicly acknowledged her heroic service. Maria read the article with amazement. While it didn't go into specific details about the incident in Afghanistan, it mentioned that she had saved the life of a fellow soldier under combat conditions and had been personally thanked by the soldier's father, a high-ranking military officer, Mrs. Chen. How did the newspaper find out about this? The general must have contacted them. The reporter called yesterday evening asking about you. I told them you were the best employee I've ever had and that anyone who served our country deserves respect. As the morning progressed, Maria noticed a significant change in how customers treated her. Instead of avoiding eye contact or making snide comments about her uniform, people were approaching her with curiosity and respect. Several customers specifically asked to be seated in her section, and many thanked her for her service. Around mid-morning, a man in his 50s wearing a baseball cap with military insignia entered the diner and specifically requested to sit at one of Maria's tables. As she approached to take his order, he stood up and extended his hand. "Specialist Santos, I'm Tom Bradley, Vietnam veteran. I read about you in the paper this morning, and I wanted to shake your hand." Maria was touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Mr. Bradley. It's an honor to meet a fellow veteran. The honor is mine. I know how hard it can be coming back to civilian life. I went through it myself 40 years ago. Different war, same challenges." As they talked, Tom explained that he had struggled with similar issues when he returned from Vietnam. He had faced judgment and misunderstanding from civilians who didn't appreciate military service, and he had worked various jobs while trying to find his place in the world. "The thing is," Tom continued, "people like us, we've seen things and done things that most folks can't understand. That uniform you're wearing represents sacrifice and service that goes way beyond what most people will ever experience."
I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Algie.
Bradley. "Sometimes it feels like people just see an old uniform and don't understand what it means." Well, after yesterday and that newspaper article, I think a lot more people are going to understand. That general did you a real favor by speaking up. Throughout the day, Maria encountered more positive interactions than she had experienced since arriving in the city. A group of college students who had previously made jokes about her appearance came in and sheepishly apologized, saying they had read the article and wanted to express their respect. A businessman who had made loud comments about military surplus clothing the week before approached her quietly and asked if he could buy her lunch as an apology. But the most significant moment came around 2 o'clock, when General Mitchell returned to the diner accompanied by 2 other people in business attire. Maria's heart rate increased as she saw them enter, wondering what this unexpected visit might mean. The general chose the same table where they had met the day before and waited for Maria to approach. When she did, he stood up with a warm smile. "Specialist Santos, I'd like you to meet Dr. Patricia Williams from City General Hospital and Mr. Jennings. James Carter from the Veterans Affairs Office." Maria shook hands with both visitors, feeling nervous about this formal introduction. "Please sit down," General Mitchell said. "We have some things to discuss that I think you'll find very interesting." Maria glanced toward Mrs. Chen, who nodded encouragingly and indicated that she could take a few minutes away from her other duties. Dr. Williams spoke first. "Ms. Santos, General Mitchell has told us about your background as a combat medic and your experience in Afghanistan. I want you to know that we're very interested in discussing employment opportunities at our hospital." Maria's eyes widened with surprise. "Employment opportunities?" "Yes. We have several programs designed to help veterans transition into civilian healthcare roles. With your combat medical experience, we believe you would be an excellent candidate for our emergency department or trauma unit." Mr. Carter from the VA office leaned forward. "Additionally, we've identified several certification programs that can fast-track veterans with your experience into civilian medical credentials. The VA will cover the full cost of these programs, and they can be completed in as little as 6 months." Maria felt overwhelmed by this sudden turn of events. Yesterday she had been struggling to pay rent while working as a waitress, and now these important people were offering her career opportunities she had only dreamed about. I don't know what to say. This is incredible, but I want to make sure I understand correctly. You're offering me a position at the hospital? Dr. Williams smiled warmly. We're offering you the opportunity to interview for several positions. Based on what General Mitchell has told us about your experience and the recommendations we've received, I'm confident that we can find a role that matches your skills and interests. General Mitchell added, Dr. Williams has agreed to personally oversee your transition process. She's a veteran herself and understands the unique challenges that military medical personnel face when entering civilian healthcare. I served as a Navy medical officer for 8 years before transitioning to civilian medicine. Dr. Williams explained, I know firsthand how valuable military medical training is, and I also know how frustrating it can be when that experience isn't recognized or valued properly. Mr. Pyer, Carter pulled out a folder full of documents. These are the certification programs I mentioned. The VA has partnerships with several local institutions that can provide accelerated training for veterans with your background. The programs are designed specifically for people who already have substantial medical experience but need civilian credentials. Maria looked through the documents with amazement. The programs covered everything from emergency medical technician certification to advanced trauma life support training. All of it would be provided at no cost to her, and some programs even included modest living stipends during the training period. This is unbelievable. How is this possible? General Mitchell's expression became more serious. Specialist Santos, what happened to you here? Being underemployed and struggling financially despite your service and qualifications is unacceptable. It's exactly the kind of situation that our Veterans Affairs Review Committee is supposed to identify and correct. The truth is, Mr. Carter added, your case has highlighted some significant gaps in our local veteran support services. We've discovered that several highly qualified veterans in this city have been struggling with similar challenges. Your situation is helping us improve our programs for everyone. Dr. Williams leaned forward with enthusiasm. Maria, I've seen your type of experience save lives in civilian settings. Combat medics often have better trauma training and real-world experience than many civilian emergency responders. We need people like you in our hospital. Maria felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. After months of feeling invisible and undervalued, this recognition of her skills and potential was overwhelming. I'm incredibly grateful for these opportunities. I just want to make sure I deserve them. You've already proven that you deserve them, General Mitchell said firmly. You saved my son's life under enemy fire. You've served your country with honor and distinction. You absolutely deserve every opportunity that comes your way. Mrs. Chen, who had been watching from a respectful distance, approached the table with a proud smile. Excuse me, but I couldn't help overhearing some of your conversation. Maria, this is wonderful news. General Mitchell stood up and shook Mrs. O'Donnell Chen's hand again. Mrs. Darwin, Chen, I want to thank you for providing employment to Specialist Santos when she needed it. You recognized her value as a person and gave her a chance when others might not have. Maria has been a blessing to our restaurant. She's professional, kind, and hardworking. I'm going to miss her, but I'm so happy to see her getting the recognition she deserves. Dr. Williams addressed Mrs. Chen directly. Ma'am, I want you to know that employing veterans like Maria reflects very well on your business. We need more employers who are willing to look past surface appearances and recognize the value that veterans bring to the workplace. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, during which the three visitors outlined a comprehensive plan for Maria's career transition. Dr. Corpsey. Williams would arrange for her to visit the hospital next week for interviews and facility tours. Fiction. Carter would help her enroll in the appropriate certification programs. General Mitchell would provide letters of recommendation and would follow up to ensure that everything proceeded smoothly. As the meeting concluded, General Mitchell stood up and once again saluted Maria with full military honors. This time, however, the gesture was witnessed by everyone in the diner, including several customers who had previously been dismissive of her military service. Specialist Santos, it has been a privilege to help arrange these opportunities for you. You've earned every bit of success that comes your way. After the three visitors left, the diner erupted in applause from the customers who had witnessed the meeting. Maria stood in the center of the restaurant, still processing everything that had just happened, while people she had served for months looked at her with new respect and admiration. Mrs. Chen approached her with tears in her eyes. Maria, I am so proud of you. You've always carried yourself with dignity, even when people didn't appreciate who you really are. Mrs. Chen, I'll never forget how kind you've been to me. You gave me a job when I needed one, and you defended me when customers were rude. I'll always be grateful. You don't need to be grateful, dear. You earned your place here through hard work and character. I'm just happy that the world is finally seeing what I've always known about you. As Maria finished her shift that day, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just 24 hours. The encounter with General Mitchell had not only validated her military service, but had opened doors to opportunities she had never imagined possible. That evening, Maria called her parents to share the incredible news. Her mother cried with joy, and her father expressed pride that his daughter's service was finally being recognized properly. For the first time in months, Maria felt optimistic about her future and confident that she was exactly where she needed to be. The weekend would bring more surprises, as word of her story continued to spread throughout the community. Local veterans groups reached out to welcome her, offering friendship and support networks she hadn't known existed. The newspaper wanted to do a follow-up story, and several community organizations invited her to speak about her experiences. Most importantly, Maria began to understand that her worth had never been determined by how others perceived her uniform. She had always been a hero. It had just taken the right person noticing to help everyone else see it too. 6 months later, Maria Santos stood in the trauma bay of City General Hospital, wearing crisp blue scrubs with her name embroidered on the pocket. The transformation from struggling waitress to respected emergency medical professional had been remarkable, but the journey had taught her lessons that went far beyond career advancement. The certification programs had been intense but rewarding. Maria's military medical experience had given her a significant advantage in the accelerated training, and her instructors had been impressed by her practical knowledge and calm demeanor under pressure. Dr. Williams had been true to her word, providing mentorship and support throughout the entire transition process. Now, as a certified emergency medical technician with specialized trauma training, Maria worked alongside doctors and nurses who valued her unique skills and experience. Her combat medical background had proven invaluable in the high-pressure environment of the emergency department, where split-second decisions could mean the difference between life and death. On this particular Friday afternoon, Maria was preparing to leave her shift when Dr. Williams approached her with a smile. "Maria, I have something I think you'll want to see." She handed Maria a letter bearing official military letterhead. As Maria opened it, she saw that it was from Lieutenant Colonel James Mitchell, the man whose life she had saved in Afghanistan. The letter read, "Dear Specialist Santos, my father told me about your incredible encounter at the diner 6 months ago. I have thought about that day in Kandahar countless times over the years, and not a day goes by that I don't feel grateful for what you did. I wanted you to know that my family and I are thriving. My wife Sarah and our children, Emma and Michael, exist because of your courage and skill. You are our hero, and we will never forget you. With deepest gratitude and respect, Lieutenant Colonel James Mitchell." Attached to the letter was a family photograph showing a smiling man in military dress uniform standing with a beautiful woman and 2 young children. Maria studied the face of the man she had treated years ago, remembering him as a critically injured patient, but seeing him now as a healthy father and husband. "That's quite a testimony to the impact you've had," Dr. Williams observed. "How does it feel to see the long-term results of your work?" Maria wiped away tears as she looked at the happy family in the photograph. "It's overwhelming in the best possible way. When you're treating someone in a combat situation, you're so focused on the immediate medical needs that you don't always think about the broader implications. Seeing this family makes everything feel worthwhile." Dr. Williams nodded understandingly. "That's exactly why we're so fortunate to have you here. Your experience gives you a perspective that helps you see beyond the immediate crisis to the lives that hang in the balance." As Maria prepared to leave the hospital, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that pivotal encounter with General Mitchell. The job at City General had provided not just financial stability, but also a sense of purpose and belonging that she had been missing since leaving the military. But perhaps even more significantly, the incident at the diner had created ripple effects throughout the community. The newspaper coverage had sparked conversations about veteran recognition and support. Local businesses had begun actively recruiting veterans, recognizing the value they brought to the workforce. The city had improved its veteran services, reducing waiting times and streamlining support programs. As Maria walked through the downtown area on her way home, she passed by Chen's diner, where she still stopped occasionally to visit Mrs. Kibru. Chen, the older woman, had become like a second mother to her, and their friendship had deepened over the months since Maria left her waitressing position. Today, however, Maria was surprised to see a new sign in the diner window. "Veteran-friendly employer. We honor those who served." Mrs. Chen had joined a program that recognized businesses committed to supporting veteran employees and customers. Inside the diner, Maria found Mrs. Chen training a new employee, another veteran who had recently transitioned to civilian life. The young man was wearing a clean but worn military uniform, and Maria could see the same mixture of pride and uncertainty in his eyes that she had once felt. "Maria!" Mrs. Chen exclaimed as she entered. "Perfect timing. I want you to meet David Rodriguez. He just started working here yesterday." Maria shook hands with David, immediately recognizing the look of someone trying to find their place in civilian society. "It's nice to meet you, David. What branch did you serve in?" "Marines, ma'am. Just finished my service 3 months ago, and I'm still figuring out what comes next." Mrs. Chen beamed with pride. David was a military police officer. He has excellent organizational skills and a strong work ethic, just like you did. Maria could see that David was nervous about customer reactions to his military appearance, the same anxiety she had experienced months earlier. She decided to share some encouragement. "David, I worked here for several months while I was transitioning. Mrs. Chen is an amazing boss, and this job taught me a lot about interacting with civilians. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about wearing your uniform. It represents something important, and the right people will recognize that." "Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Chen told me about your story. It's pretty inspiring to know that things can work out." Mrs. Chen added, "I've told David that if anyone gives him trouble about his uniform, they'll have to deal with me. I won't tolerate disrespect toward veterans in my restaurant." As they talked, Maria noticed that the diner's atmosphere had changed significantly since her time there. Veterans were regularly stopping in, creating an informal support network. Mrs. Chen had become something of a community advocate for veteran issues, and her restaurant had become a gathering place for people who understood and respected military service. "Mrs. Chen, what you've created here is really special. This place has become more than just a restaurant. Well, you opened my eyes to how difficult things can be for veterans. I realized that I could do more than just provide jobs. I could create a space where veterans feel welcomed and valued." As Maria prepared to leave, David approached her quietly. "Ma'am, can I ask you something? How did you deal with people staring or making comments about your uniform?" Maria considered the question carefully, remembering her own struggles with the same issue. "David, I won't lie to you. It's hard. Some people will judge you based on appearances, and some of their comments will hurt. But I learned that my uniform represents the best parts of who I am, regardless of what others think. The right people will see that, and those are the people whose opinions matter." Did it get easier over time? It did, but not in the way I expected. It got easier because I started meeting people who recognized the value of military service. General Mitchell was the first, but he wasn't the last. There are more people out there who appreciate veterans than you might think. You just have to find them. David nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for saying that. It helps to hear from someone who's been through it." After leaving the diner, Maria continued her walk home through the familiar streets where she had once felt so isolated and judged. Now those same streets felt welcoming and full of possibility. She had not only found her place in the community, but had helped create opportunities for other veterans to do the same. As she approached her apartment building, a much nicer place than the one she had rented during her waitressing days, Maria's phone rang. The caller ID showed it was General Mitchell. "Good evening, General." "Good evening, Specialist Santos. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted to check in on how things are going." "Things are going wonderfully, sir. I love my job at the hospital, and I feel like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be."
That's excellent to hear. I also wanted to let you know that the Veterans Affairs Review Committee has completed its assessment of this city.
Your case was instrumental in identifying problems and implementing solutions. We've made significant improvements to veteran services here, and other cities are adopting our recommendations. Maria was amazed to learn that her individual situation had contributed to systemic changes that would help other veterans. "Sir, I had no idea that our meeting would lead to such broad improvements. Sometimes it takes one personal story to illustrate larger problems. Your experience helped us understand that having programs on paper isn't enough. We need to ensure that veterans can actually access and benefit from those programs. I'm honored to have been part of that process, even if it was unintentional." There's something else I wanted to discuss with you. The committee is looking for veterans who can serve as peer mentors and advocates. Based on your experience and your success in transitioning to civilian healthcare, we'd like you to consider joining our outreach team.
Maria was intrigued by the opportunity.
What would that involve? You would work with newly transitioned veterans, helping them navigate the challenges of civilian life. You'd also speak at events and help us identify gaps in services. It would be part-time work that you could do in addition to your hospital job. The idea of helping other veterans avoid the struggles she had experienced was deeply appealing to Maria. General, I would be honored to take on that role. I know how isolating and difficult the transition can be, and if I can help others find their path more easily, I want to do that. Excellent. I'll have someone contact you next week with the details. After ending the call, Maria stood on her apartment balcony, looking out over the city that had initially seemed so unwelcoming but had ultimately become her home. She thought about all the people who had played important roles in her transformation: Mrs. Chen, who had given her a chance when she needed one, Dr. Williams, who had recognized her potential, General Mitchell, who had seen past her worn uniform to the hero underneath, and even the customers who had initially judged her, some of whom had later apologized and become supporters. Most importantly, Maria realized that she had never stopped being the same person she had always been. The uniform had always represented courage, service, and dedication. The mockery from strangers hadn't changed that. What had changed was finding a community of people who recognized and valued those qualities. As she prepared for bed that evening, Maria hung up her hospital scrubs and carefully folded her military uniform, which she still wore occasionally to veteran events and ceremonies. Both sets of clothing represented different chapters of her life, but they were connected by the same core values of service and helping others. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, Maria saw not just a successful healthcare professional, but a veteran who had overcome adversity and found her place in the world. More importantly, she had become an advocate and mentor for others facing similar challenges. The young woman who had been mocked for her tattered uniform had indeed been a hero all along. It had just taken the right moment and the right person to help everyone else see what had always been true. Now, Maria was determined to be that right person for other veterans who needed someone to recognize their worth and help them find their path forward. Her story had become more than just a personal triumph. It had become a catalyst for change that would benefit countless other veterans for years to come. And every day as she went to work saving lives in the emergency department, Maria carried with her the knowledge that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the most ordinary moments, and that heroes can be found in the most unexpected places.